podcasting to you from the beautiful Pacific Northwest. I'm your host, Brad Johnson. Welcome to The Theory of Wine. In today's podcast, we go to the heartland and talk with a Wisconsin winemaker, Amanda Stefl of Timber Hill Winery. We're going to talk about Cold Hardy grapes, being the youngest female winemaker and owner in the Midwest, and we're going to chat about some spicy wine. Stick around. Support for this podcast comes from the new documentary film, Wine Diamonds, Uncorking America's Heartland, streaming now at winediamondsfilm.com and from wineryboost.com, influence marketing for the wine industry. My guest, Amanda Stefl, is the owner, winemaker of Timber Hill Winery, located in south central Wisconsin. She's one of the youngest female winemaker and winery owners in the Midwest. Amanda prides herself in making wines with youthful energy and lasting impressions. After studying microbiology at the University of Iowa, she continued her education in winemaking and winery management at Kirkwood Community College. Amanda's been able to mix her interest in wine, education, and contribute to the growing wine industry of Wisconsin. Offering more than 20 varieties from her small family-run winery operation, she crafts wines grown in the spirit of the local artisan. Timber Hill Winery's delicious wines are sure to leave wine lovers with a lively impression they'll never forget. Wisconsin has an impressive and eclectic grape growing and winemaking industry, and Amanda works with a handful of grape growers throughout Wisconsin, all who appreciate and celebrate the local viticulture. Amanda Stefl, welcome to The Theory of Wine.
Thank you for having me.
Well, this is awesome. This is kind of a strange full circle thing. So apparently you and I had met a while back ago, back when you were taking classes at Kirkwood Community College with the winemaker and wine grower and celebrity Lucas McIntyre. So it's been a while ago.
Yes.
When did you start taking those classes?
So I graduated from the University of Iowa in 2011. And then that fall, I started taking the winemaking classes at Kirkwood with Lucas. And I believe it was that fall that you came and spoke with us about marketing in the winery.
How funny. That's so strange. So when you began your program, or when you were in your program at the University of Iowa in microbiology, were you thinking wine at that time, or what was going through your mind when you're doing that?
I wasn't. So I went to school for 4 years. I have a BS in microbiology. And at the time I was taking just microbiology classes, kind of on track to either get my master's or PhD in microbiology. I was working in a lab that researched bacteria. And then once I completed my microbiology degree, I went on to a conference. And at the conference, they had a career symposium where Kirsty Harmon from Virginia, she's a winemaker. She gave a speech at the career symposium about her path from biology to winemaking. And I didn't know what I was going to do. And after listening to her, I was convinced that was going to be a good path for me. And that's where I looked into where I could get more education and found the Kirkwood program in my backyard.
That's pretty cool. So at that point, were you a fan of wine already, or?
Yes, I dabbled in a little bit of wine and beverage consumption at the University of Iowa, but I wasn't a connoisseur by any means until I really started making it and doing more.
Well, kind of walk us through that. Walk us through your story. I mean, you were taking classes with Lucas. Kind of take us from then to where you are today.
Right. So once I found out about winemaking as a possible career, I found the program at Kirkwood and I signed up for the classes there, and it worked out really well. I was a fresh graduate, so I got a job in a lab, but then I worked during the day and took the classes at Kirkwood, and it's a 1-year certificate program there. So they do the classes and it's a very hands-on learning experience there, which is what I really appreciated. So we were in the classroom a little bit, and then you'd pretty much just be in the actual winery or in the vineyard. So they have a small vineyard and an actual commercial winery at the college.
That's cool.
So you can really learn hands-on.
Right. So what was that experience like for you?
It was really interesting. A lot of the other people in the course were home winemakers that were just looking to kind of expand their knowledge. And there was one other gentleman who went on to open his own winery as well. But it was great. Lucas is a great mentor. And so being able to learn from him, I think, was a really good experience.
So he's a fascinating guy. He's got a ton of passion, and he's been one of the longest term people in Iowa making wine. So I mean, he's been there for a long time. He worked with Paul Tabor at Tabor Home Vineyards and Winery, and he's worked around the state, and now he's running this program at Kirkwood, which is pretty cool.
Yes.
And, you know, we get to meet a lot of interesting people that are kind of entering the wine industry. So you finish your program with Lucas McIntyre at Kirkwood Community College. You move back home to Wisconsin?
Yeah, so I'm originally from Wisconsin. And so once my husband was completed with his schooling, we decided to move to Wisconsin. And I said that when we moved, I wasn't going to get another job in a lab because that just was not what I wanted to do. And said this is the perfect opportunity for me to do my research and figure out how to start the winery. So then while I was doing that, I also got a job at a winery working in a tasting room so that I could get some experience on that side of the business as well.
Which winery was that?
It was actually Cooper's Hawk Winery, and it's kind of a chain. It's pretty popular in the Chicago area, and they have it's a restaurant and winery. And
Nice.
so in their tasting room was connected with the restaurant, but they were very busy, and they also had a wine club. So I learned a lot of different things from them
Nice.
that I didn't get experience with at Kirkwood.
Right. So your winery is a family operation. And so you did your program, you've got some more winery experience, and now tell us how all the rest of it kind of came together.
Yeah, so once I moved to Wisconsin, I looked for a place to start the winery and looked into how to get permits and everything. So I secured a location here in Milton that was perfect for production. And my original plan was to have the tasting room at a different spot. But so then once we got the location, we filed for the federal permits. And that whole process took about 6 months to get the federal and state and local permits that you need. And then it was almost a year from then before we opened our doors to the public.
All right. So are you growing your own grapes, or how does that work for you guys there?
Right now, we do not grow any of our own grapes. We work with 4 different vineyards in Wisconsin, and then we also work with one out of New York State.
Okay. So with your microbiology background, how does that impact the wines? I mean, we all have this kind of wine philosophy, whether we actually think about it or if it's just kind of part of us. What's your winemaking philosophy based upon your experiences working in labs? I mean, how does it impact your wines?
I keep my actual winemaking is very simple. I stick really to the basics. A lot of Wisconsin wineries, because the wines have high acid levels, they'll run malolactic fermentation and do different things to adjust the acidity levels. And a lot of times we don't do any of that kind of stuff here. We keep it very clean and simple. And then I also like to experiment with my science background and do some different things. So I'd like to try, like we have a margarita wine that I love wine, but I also love margaritas. So I had to find a way to combine the two. And so just experimenting and making some fun, exciting, different kinds of wines that you don't see everywhere.
Right.
I think that's kind of been a big influence I've had.
That's fascinating. You know, I'm living in Washington State now, and the wines are beautiful out here. I think in the Midwest it's a little bit different. You know, we don't have the tradition, at least the vinifera. The grapes pretty much come out of the ground, off the vine, and they got like perfect pH, perfect acidity. You ferment them, and you're good to go. I mean, in the Midwest, the grapes are different. can you talk to us about the grapes and the challenges of the high acidity, and why do these grapes have high acidity? What's going on with that?
Yeah, so a lot of the grapes that grow here, they're the cold climate hybrids. And since we have a shorter growing season and everything, that affects the sugar levels and the pH and everything. So that it's something that the vineyards really have to battle with before they harvest, is when to pick, because you might not reach that ideal pH or Brix before you need to harvest. I know last year we had a new variety called Petite Pearl coming in, and it was still only at 16 Brix in November.
Wow.
So, and he's said, I have to take it off. It's going to freeze this weekend. So it's a never-ending battle with the weather that we have and getting the grapes to be the quality and the numbers that you want them to be. Right.
Now, having worked spent time in the Midwest wine industry, some of the wines have a little bit of sweetness. I mean, why, what's a good reason that we leave some sweetness behind, other than we like a little bit of sweet? I mean, is the acidity one of the challenges? Yeah, well, the sweetness can cut down on that. I don't have a problem with wines that are sweet, and I think that's one of the things that I want to showcase with the theory of wine. That there's a whole world of wines out there, and I think what's really cool about the Midwest is that, you know, we are using grapes that most of the world hasn't maybe even heard of before, and you're growing them in places where that a generation or two ago they never even thought about making great wine in these kind of cooler regions. And so tell us about your being the youngest female winemaker in the Midwest. What's that like? Well, I don't think it affects too much. I know sometimes in the tasting room, people will ask me questions and just presume, like if my dad or someone else is around, they'll automatically assume that they must be the owner or the winemaker. Right. And a lot of times people are fairly surprised when I tell them that it's actually me who made the wine. So it's kind of a fun surprise, though. Yeah. We're going to take a little break here, and we'll be back in a moment with the second half of our interview with Amanda Stefl of Timber Hill Winery. Hey, wine friends. Each week, The Theory of Wine will bring you interesting content from winemakers, wine growers, wine rebels, writers and bloggers, and serious wine nerds from around the world. Want to join us? Connect with us at theoryofwine.com, on Facebook, or Twitter. Cheers, friends. Welcome back to the second half of our interview with Amanda Stefl of Timber Hill Winery, as she talks about the challenges of being a new winery owner, cold hardy grapes, and the unusually spicy wines she makes. So what's been your biggest challenge as a winery owner and a winemaker, and you know, freshly minted wine school person? There's just been a lot of, you know, getting the whole permit process. That's not a very easy process. And the state of Wisconsin also has their own more specific laws that make it even more difficult. So some of the logistics and legal hoops that you have to jump through were difficult. Then there's just been a few growing pains that we've gone through with needing new equipment and finding the balance of what equipment to upgrade now versus right. Not. And so the growing pains have been fun, but it's hard making sure you have the right equipment, but not spending too much and keeping everything rolling. Right. So when you put together a winery business, do you think like 5 or 10 years out in front of you? Like, where do you imagine this winery to go, or how big do you want to be as you kind of mature your vines that you've got in the ground now, but also grow your winery business? Yeah, exactly. It's definitely, you have to look more at like the 5 or 10 year plan, not the 2 or 3 year business plan. I mean, it just with the
process of starting it, the permits and everything, it takes over a year before you're actually up and running and selling wine to begin with.
Right. So I know Wisconsin, Elmer Swenson was one of the major influencers in the Wisconsin grape growing world. He tended some vines back in the 40s after his dad, who was a Norwegian transplant, started growing grapevines and hybridizing them. So there's a long storied history of growing wine grapes in Wisconsin. Tell me about the grapes that you're kind of digging right now, and what's happening in your cellar.
My favorites are some of the University of Minnesota hybrids. So they have a really good program. And so for white wine, there's La Crescent is my favorite of the Wisconsin grown cold hardy grape. The citrus aroma and very tropical fruit. So La Crescent is my go-to for the white wines. And then I would say for reds, they're coming out with more new ones, but Marquette is another Minnesota grape that I think still has a lot of good potential. I love the black pepper spice in it, and it can kind of compare to some of the other dry red wines that people are used to drinking when they want to go from maybe a California variety over to something Wisconsin.
Right. So when because people have preconceptions when they come in, they expect, I'm going to a winery, they may be thinking Cabernet, they may be thinking Chardonnay, and they get to the winery and they see La Crescent and they see Marquette or Frontenac. How do you kind of guide people through that transition? Because it can be kind of an abrupt change if they're not used to kind of these new types of grapes and wines.
Yeah, that is something that we constantly are addressing, is a lot of people that come in here, even though they're from down the street, they don't know, they've never heard of La Crescent, Marquette, Frontenac, any of the grapes that can grow here. And some of them didn't even know you could grow grapes here in Wisconsin.
Right.
So we get asked questions a lot, how does this compare to a Chardonnay? And my first answer is always, it doesn't. They're different,
right.
But they still want an answer.
Right.
So I have to tell them that, Chardonnays are usually dry. So, maybe try this La Crescent, or if they like a Riesling, then, we have Edelweiss, which is a great Wisconsin grown grape. So we are working on creating a guide too, so that we can give to our customers and say, if you like Pinot Noir, you should try a Marquette, and just kind of coming up with some comparisons so that they can hopefully learn too. That's one of our missions, is to help people learn more about the types of grapes that grow here and make Marquette a household wine name.
So what is it about Marquette that's pretty cool for you?
I don't know. I guess that's just, we have, for red wine that we make here, we have Marquette, Petite Pearl, which is a fairly newer one, Frontenac, Maréchal Foch. And I think Marquette is my favorite, but Foch is more popular, I think, in the state of Wisconsin.
Foch has got Foch has a reputation, and it's a tough grape to make into an amazing wine. And I've had Maréchal Foch as an extraordinary wine, and it's made in Ontario, it's made in Oregon, it's made in the Midwest. It's one of the old French American hybrids that they crafted or created after the phylloxera problems back in the 1800s. And so I'm a fan of Maréchal Foch. I think it's kind of a cool grape, and it's probably a grape that most people like. Foch, what the heck is that? How do you spell that? So I like it. Do you know much about the Wisconsin wine growing histories?
I don't know exactly how long. I know about Elmer Swenson, and he's been around for years. One of the vineyards that we worked with, they started in 1975. So they're one of the oldest vineyards in the state, but most of them are fairly new. So early 2000s. So there's not a lot of old vineyards in
Right.
Wisconsin.
Well, I know Waldersheim's been around for a while, and
Yes.
south of you, over south and west of you, Galena Cellars has been around for quite a long time, and so there's
Yes.
some storied wineries in the area that, again, most people probably aren't familiar with, but it really is pretty cool stuff that you guys are doing there. I think one of the really neat things about Midwestern wines is your chance to experiment, and not only with brand new grapes that most of the world doesn't even know about, but with fruit wines. And you make kind of a special, kind of unusual wine. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I would say our most unique wine that we make is our jalapeno wine. And so that it is literally fermented jalapenos. So it's not an infused wine or anything. We use a processor and make our own jalapeno pulp. And yeah, we wear masks because it's a very strong aroma.
Mm-hmm.
And but once it's completed, it looks just like any other white wine in the bottle. And we like to use it. So at the tasting room, we will serve it most of the time with a side of Bloody Mary mix, because it is still very spicy. So it's fermented jalapenos, and they don't lose their heat in the fermentation process. And so we'll serve it with the Bloody Mary mix, because we've actually won a couple of awards at Bloody Mary contests.
No kidding.
Bloody Marys are very big in Wisconsin. And so we've competed with the jalapeno wine and Bloody Marys. And then we also have recipes to cook with it and put it in tacos or chili.
Oh, that sounds pretty awesome. I like that. So where did you get the idea to make a jalapeno wine?
My dad actually is the one who thought of it. Yeah. So throughout my winemaking career, he's kind of been my assistant winemaker. Right. He helps me a lot. And so it was something where both him and we love jalapenos and spicy food in general. And so he was the one who thought of coming up with the jalapeno wine.
That's creative. How is that received by your customers?
It's one of our most popular wines. We have a lot of people who love spicy food, and so they come in just for the jalapeno wine. And then we have people who get it because they know that so-and-so who loves spicy foods will love it. So it's been a big seller.
So the wine industry in the Midwest is fairly new. I mean, we've been around for a while, but it's gaining attraction. It continues to build and grow. We have the place like University of Minnesota, their grape breeding program, and we have Cornell University in New York State that has a grape breeding program for cooler regions. And I think it's pretty cool. So we have people coming to our wineries. What are they saying to you when they come to your place once they've oh, you're here? What are the folks saying about Wisconsin wines and your wines?
In general, a lot of the people that we get, they're new wine drinkers. So they're pretty new to the experience of coming to a tasting room and everything. And they might not be familiar with wines almost at all. And so that's been fun. A lot of people come in and they say, oh, I'm so picky about wine, or I hardly ever drink it, but we love trying your wines. Like the margarita wine, that one really converts a lot of beer-only drinkers or non-wine drinkers. I have converted a few to wine drinkers with that one. Yeah.
So when people come in there, I mean, if I like a good, I don't know, a Riesling, what would you recommend for me? Yeah,
the Riesling, the Edelweiss is a really similar grape that grows well here in Wisconsin. And so we have a wonderful semi-sweet white that's made with the Edelweiss grapes from Wisconsin.
Cool. Do you ship your wines around the country?
We do. We go through a wholesaler website. So vinoshipper.com, we go through them and they can ship to 30 different states.
Okay, I'll make sure to include a link to that Vino Shipper to your online shopping cart when I do the blog post for the show here. Is there anything else that we should be telling people here that we haven't talked about yet, Amanda?
Well, we do have the wine pouches. I don't know if you saw any photos of that.
Tell me about a wine pouch. What's that about?
So this past summer, we released a series of wine pouches.
Okay.
So being a millennial growing up with the Capri Sun juice packs, I thought it would be fun. We have a sweet wine for every day of the week. I call it the Social Sweet series. And so we put those into pouches. So you can get Margarita Monday or Throwback Thursday Red. And they come in, the pouches are just this 187 milliliters. So just a nice glass of wine. And they come with a straw and everything. So yeah, so people had a lot of fun with them this past summer. We had people sending us messages. They were tailgating at the Brewers game with them, kayaking and boating with them, camping. So they're kind of wine juice packs on the go.
Oh, I love it. That's awesome. Amanda Stefl, thank you so much for hanging out with us today on The Theory of Wine. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
Amanda Stefl is the owner, winemaker of Timber Hill Winery, located in south central Wisconsin, and is one of the youngest female winemakers and winery owners in the Midwest. Want to know more about Timber Hill Winery? Check out their website, timberhillwinery.com. I'll post links to their website and contact information on my theoryofwine.com blog. Cheers. Hey, wine friends. Thanks for hanging out with us for Theory of Wine podcast, brought to you by a new wine documentary called Wine Diamonds, Uncorking America's Heartland, now available online at winediamondsfilm.com and wineryboost.com, influence marketing for the wine industry. Thanks for listening, downloading, and sharing us. Find us at theoryofwine.com. See you next time. Cheers, friends.